Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope, the podcast based off the newsletter from St. John's, Sand Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the church's contemporary DPG.
Yes, and we already forgot what that stands for, but it's important.
I needed a title, so we made one up.
It's super important. Super important. So, glad we got that out of the way.
That's right.
Everybody, there's snow outside.
I was woken up by a 4-year-old who said, "There's snow outside. We can go make snowmen, snow angels, and have a snowball fight." He was very excited, and it was about 7:00 in the morning. So, but we went out before church. Because I go, I'm at the 10:45 service, so we went out and bundled the kids up and did the whole thing, and they had the time of their lives. They loved it.
That's awesome. Oh, good. I'm glad. I still have, to this day, memories of when I used to live in Wisconsin and we got so much snow. Man. And we bundled my daughter up, and she was just tiny as can be. But, it was almost like, the Christmas Story.
Yes.
She couldn't move. She was so, and we just stuck her in the snowbank. But, I mean, the snowbank was like 2 foot high. It almost came up to her waist.
Yeah.
It was...
Now that you're from Missouri, of course, as most people know, but you were up in Wisconsin for a while. Now my sister-in-law is from this area.
Yeah,
moved up to Wisconsin, and they are very big. And I don't think I'm offending anybody by saying this, but they really like to be like, well, we're Wisconsin people, so like, you don't need a coat in this weather. And it's like it's 1 degree outside.
So how long have they been up there?
Let's see. She's probably been up there like 7 or 8 years. Well, no, maybe longer than that. Maybe 10 years. Maybe 10 years. But the thing is, they'll send the kids out. Like there was one day we were up there. She sent the kids out and said, "Go outside and jump on the trampoline." It was kind of like this. It was wet. Mm-hmm. It was really cold, and there was some like ice on the grass.
Yeah.
The kids were outside within like 45 seconds. They were out there crying on the trampoline because they thought they weren't allowed to come back in. And their feet, they didn't have shoes on.
Oh, no.
Their feet were freezing. And I'm like, you guys are psychopaths. And they're like, we're Wisconsin people. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not Wisconsin people. All right? You want to be Wisconsin people. You're just not.
I always say it takes like whenever you move to an area, it always takes a good 2-3 years to really get a hold of what's going on and everything else. And, I think that holds true. But, I mean, I'd also say I was in Wisconsin for 6 years. And I would also say it took me all that 6 years to kind of really begin to understand the culture. And to be fair, that was when I left. So who knows what I would have learned had I, stayed up there for a longer period of time. But I mean, it really is. I mean, it's amazing because on the one hand, it's not that far away.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it is completely different.
Yeah.
And, and by the way, even when I say that, realize like even this area is different than where I grew up.
Yeah.
And sometimes whenever I go home, that's what I do. I go home and I'm always like, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Not that we want to get too far into this because probably have stuff to talk about, but what's one main thing? Is there anything that really comes to mind that's like it's so different from up here compared to Missouri?
Well, I mean, I'd say the main thing is for me in my childhood, well, actually, I'll be honest. I was talking to somebody at church just today about this. It comes down to forest.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Illinois, you guys have forest. You guys have a forest here, a forest there. Like Missouri, especially where in the area I'm from, like more like the hills of Missouri, is like nonstop forest.
Yeah.
It's like we had forests that came straight up to our house that were attached to other forests. I spent most of my childhood in the forest.
Yeah, yeah.
I spent most of my childhood with lizards and snakes and squirrels and everything else. And like, I mean, and again, whenever you're a kid growing up in that, you just don't think anything of it.
Yeah.
But whenever you get over to Illinois and all of a sudden there's so many things that are just flat. And then, I remember, one trip or something a while back. And, my kids, and I think there's other kids with us that were just amazed by the lizards.
Oh, yeah.
And like they'd never seen a lizard before, and I was like, yeah, it's just a lizard, whatever. And they were trying to catch it, and then after a while I said, no, you gotta you got to put your hand where you think it's gonna go, because that's how you get them. And I realized like they had never caught a lizard, like
right.
Whereas again, with my childhood, like that's part of what I used to do. Now we used to do it on the side of the house because they'd always be on the side of the house,
right?
And we were always taught, and actually even this summer, we saw some lizards out there by the house I grew up in, like not the house I grew, but in the town in the area I grew up in. My parents built a new house and they live there in a different area now, but that's where we were. And they saw a lizard with a bright blue tail, and I said, "Oh, don't get those. Those are poisonous." And hey, it's the age of Google, right? So we started
Right.
Googling it, and that's an old wives' tale. They are not poisonous at all. But like it was like in the Wikipedia page. Like a lot of people believe these are poisonous, and like yeah, my whole childhood I was like, "Don't touch those. Those are poisonous," and they are not. Or at least those ones weren't.
That's interesting. I love learning about like the microcultures of different areas because it's just so interesting to me. And I was a road rep for 3 years with Kidder, and I would drive 2 hours north of here, and just the little things I'd learn about towns, or what people think of this town or what people think of that town, or whatever the rumors are about this group of people. It's so interesting. It's so funny, And I mean, and honestly, I grew up in Washington, and I had never heard of Goofy Ridge once in my life until I moved to Pekin. And then everybody's like making jokes. Oh yeah, Goofy Ridge, this Goofy Ridge. I never had heard of it. So it's so interesting that you can only be 40 minutes away.
Now, just for sake of curiosity, have you been to Goofy Ridge?
No, well, now here's the thing, as the, don't get the blue-tailed ones. I have been told, like, do not go to Goofy Ridge. Do not drive through Goofy Ridge. There are people who have been very explicit about that to me.
Well, I mean, again, I'm still kind of a newbie around here myself, but I would say, you get a couple people, and it's during the day. Actually, breakfast time. Go to the Hialeah Club. It's kind of like a bar in town, a diner in town. They have a great breakfast. I've only actually been there one time for breakfast, but they got a great breakfast. It's kind of like on the kind of the edge there of Goofy Ridge, but it gives you an idea of what it's like, while at the same time you can go there for breakfast. It's a great place.
Yeah.
Don't go there after dark.
I've been
again. So I've been told.
So you've been told, yeah.
I've been told.
It's so interesting because I went to not that. Well, now we're getting on all this stuff, but it's so fun. It's so interesting to me. I went to Havana, Illinois.
Yeah,
and the director there, he started talking about the Spoon River Chronicles book, and I'm going, what's the Spoon River Chronicles book? And he goes, oh, come on, you've taken English class. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I wasn't good at English, but yeah. And he's going, well, every English class in America reads Spoon River Chronicles. And I'm sitting there going, I have never heard of this book. I've never heard anybody. I mean, you've heard people talk about Dracula. You've heard people talk about, Pride and Prejudice. You've heard all these books names. But even if you haven't read them, this I had never heard of. And he gave me a copy of it when I was leaving because I became a stay-at-home dad and everything. And then, got this wonderful job. But he gave me a copy of it, and it's the weirdest book. But in his eyes, he grew up around this area, so they studied it in his high school. Then he moved to, he went to Havana, and they teach it there as well. And so to him, he's like, everybody knows this book. It's taught in every English class in the country. I don't think it's taught anywhere except for like Lewiston, Havana, and like Cuba. I don't think there's any other towns that study the Spoon River Chronicles in the state, let alone the country. Yeah. So it's just really funny because this little book that is like a big deal to those English classes because it's right there, and they'll study the book, and it's all these little excerpts about people, like specific people, and they would take a bus trip over to Lewiston because that's where it's written about. Yeah, and they go visit all the graves of the actual people these things are written about.
That's actually kind of cool.
So it was cool, but I think they tell these students like this is like a internationally successful book that everybody reads, and it's like I don't think they do. Maybe if someone's a big English person listening to this, maybe they will, like know
Yeah.
more about that. Or
Yeah.
I tried reading it, but it was so strange to me. I got about 5 pages in. I'm like, okay, I do not know what's happening in this book, or it didn't make any sense because it's not like a story. It's just like, oh, this person. Oh,
We got a
we
motorcycle,
got a motorcycle.
outside.
That was loud.
It's a very loud motorcycle.
And I don't know. It's like this is just it's a strange little book, very odd. Anyway,
I see. I'll one little tidbit. I mean, we're getting a little off topic, but that's okay.
I'm liking where this is going though. Anyway,
it's a lot of fun. But I always think like the first time I ever got introduced to Havana, Illinois.
yeah,
And okay, everybody, I hope this makes you laugh. I don't know if it will or not. I am, for whatever reason, I am a huge Futurama fan. I love Futurama. I have not watched the newest season yet. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. I haven't. I should, but I have watched like the original 10 seasons like 3 or 4 times.
wow.
For no reason
Yeah.
whatsoever. Just no
You
reason.
just like it though, yeah.
But there is an episode where this. So as you know, it takes place in the future and yada yada yada. Fry's like the main character. He's kind of a doofus from like 1999.
Yeah.
Who got frozen.
Yeah, accidentally
You know.
gets frozen and then
You know.
wakes up in the future.
Yeah, it's like 3,000 something. But in the process, there's like these dramas, almost like a soap opera that happens with robots. And one of the name of the robots is called Calculon. There is a storyline where Calculon as a character is pretty much killed off, but he is still alive and he doesn't know what to do with his life. And so he decides to go into theater acting. And they show a little piece of Calculon doing theater acting, and he is doing like a one-man show, like a one-act show. And I've seen these done with like real actors.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's telling his harrowing story about, where he grew up and everything. And he talks about how he was born and raised in Havana, Illinois, and then was on a steamboat. And so, like, that's actually like how he starts. So Calculon starts his whole thing like, I was a young boy in Havana. And it's like, it was really funny because like
Why would you reference that,
Yeah, I've been to Havana. I mean, maybe at one point in its history, it was like a big place to stop or port.
I don't know, but you feel like there must be a writer or something on staff who, like is from Illinois or from that area or something. Because there's a comedy group that they do a lot of online videos, and there's this one girl who she will make references. They'll be like, "Whoa, it's the big city," and she'll go, Normal, Illinois, and she'll make references to these random towns in Illinois. And I'm like, and I can't find. I tried to look her up and see like where was she from, but I'm like, she has to be from Illinois, in this area, because I don't know how she would reference all these weird little towns.
But yeah,
not the Normal small. But
I was going to say like Normal and Bloomington though, they've got some kind of claim to fame. So does Pekin, for that matter.
Yeah.
I always think like, and I can't remember which one it is, but. Pekin Insurance expanded and became, obviously they went nationwide and they became, what is it?
I don't know what.
Is it Farmers? Is it? I
don't.
See, I'm gonna get called out for this one.
Yeah, we
because
should really know
can't-
this.
But the other thing too is like in like Bloomington, Bloomington is where the first I think Steak and Shake is at. As well,
really?
And so, like, there's actually like some major businesses around.
We
here.
should look up. We should do that in an episode. Look up all the famous things about Central Illinois that we can find. Because it'd be interesting.
There's actually quite a bit around here.
There's a lot more than you would probably think.
That's one of the awesome things about this whole area is that it can, to some degree, it can trick you. You go around, you look at some of these small towns, you go, this is such a tiny little town. But, there was a time when it wasn't. There was a time whenever some of these were major routes and major roads.
Right.
I mean, look, I remember one of the first things I did when I got here, when I moved down here, because I'd never lived like in Illinois to the point where I was like, okay, this is just now my home. Like it's Illinois. And one of the first things I did was I looked up a biography on Abraham Lincoln, and it was a long one because it's an audiobook, and it was like it was like 60 hours long. It was a long book.
Man, people, we love our Lincoln. We love our Lincoln.
But one of the cool things about it is, like, as we were going through the history of it, like, he kept mentioning these places, and I was like, oh wow, like, yeah, that's over there, and that's over. It was like, and even like when you get to like Sandridge Forest and stuff like that, that's mentioned quite a bit in like Lincoln's travels and stuff like that, and so yeah, there's quite a bit of history that's just all around us. That we don't know about, or what have you.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I love when people reference the old saying, "If it plays in Peoria." Have you heard that one?
No,
really. That's an old entertainment statement that apparently at one point in time, Peoria was sort of the standard. Like, we're going to send this act to Peoria, and if it goes well there, we know they're probably going to like make it in the country, like going on a big tour. So they would send bands, they would send, comedians, whatever, to Peoria. But now it just makes me laugh because a lot of people say, like, if it plays in Peoria, it can be anywhere. But it's almost at this point to me like Peoria is such a bad market that if you could somehow, by the grace of God, like do well in Peoria, you got a chance to make it, somewhere else. But not likely, that's kind of that's really how that's the cynical way of looking at it, I guess you could say. But yeah, it's fun though. It's fun to hear about all these little places and everything and learn so much. Now, were you taught a lot about Lincoln in school, or was it kind of like, yeah, he's another president?
I mean, don't get me wrong. He wasn't just another president. I mean, obviously, he's very significant from a historical standpoint.
Right.
So we actually learned quite a bit about Lincoln, but we learned about him among, like, the greats. Like we talked quite a bit about George Washington, for instance. We talked a lot about, Lincoln or FDR, and then, even JFK, and then all, kind of going forward. So, I mean, he definitely wasn't just, like, a random president. He was actually quite significant. So we did spend a lot of time on him. Now, did we spend the same amount of time that you guys spend on him? Probably not.
Yeah. That's what I wonder, yeah.
Probably not.
That's one of those little quirks, Spoon River Chronicles. It's like it's a local, Lincoln's from Illinois, so we kind of like to talk about it.
I would also say that we spent a lot of time with Mark Twain.
See, and honestly, don't know much. I mean, a little bit, but it's not like we studied Mark Twain that much when I was.
And so that's always the question, like, because Mark Twain is kind of like an American icon from a cultural standpoint, and I know some of this might just be an age gap, is what I'm saying, because
true.
Like nowadays a lot of schools are actually trying to get rid of Mark Twain, and part of that's because of the use of the N-word, which is very prevalent in his books. You got to put it into perspective from a time standpoint. It's completely accurate. You read through the books, you completely understand what's going on and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like a lot of people get really, offended by that word.
Right. Yeah.
And the negative connotations that go with it. And it makes sense. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like,
Yeah, is the material worth the read for what you're getting out of it versus, it's hard. It's a hard discussion.
I mean, again, I think one of those things, and this is kind of a cultural question or a cultural discussion, really, where we go like, at what point in time as a culture can we kind of, shut down all this, we're going to be offended by everything, and actually look at things and go, okay, let's put this into a historical perspective. Because, like, you read Mark Twain, he's not like putting people down. That was just the verbiage that they used.
Right.
And yes, it was the way that they thought and the way that they understood, both, relations between whites and African Americans, but, between all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And in a lot of respects, actually, Mark Twain props up the African American quite a bit throughout some of his novels. And so it's like you can't quite say, oh, well, he's just a big racist and a bigot. Well, it's not quite true. Mark Twain really is a kind of a gem. If you've never read him before, I don't know if you've ever read him.
I mean, in school and stuff when we've done a book or something on him, but we didn't. But we definitely did not study Mark Twain probably nearly to the extent that you guys did. Because it's just that's what I had a friend from Georgia, and I asked him how they taught the Civil War, and he said all they taught it like it was
You mean
very
the War
much
of Northern Aggression?
yeah, exactly. But he said it was very much. Yeah, so we lost the war, but look at all the cool stuff we did. Like we were really crushing it over here at this point. And, okay, we lost that battle. Like everything that kind of was the downfall of the whole thing. But look at all the stuff we did. Like it was very much look how awesome the South was during this. But it makes he's in the South there. It makes sense. I understand why they teach it that way. So it's always interesting.
See, and I think I'll be honest with you. Like as I think of like current education. I do think that some adjustments to how we teach the Civil War would probably be good to do. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, again, like even when you read about Lincoln, like, look, I get it. On the one hand, I'm not quite ready to give up on this idea that, look, guys, sometimes you got good guys and bad guys. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Sometimes these guys are bad guys. But on the other hand, I also think it's really important to try to understand to the best of our ability where the other side is coming from. And I think we're starting to fail to do that. And again, as a society, I think we don't do this very much. Yeah. And I think that's why we get so many people that are so offended so often. Mm-hmm. Look, Lincoln did not go into office saying, I'm going to free all the slaves. Lincoln went into office saying, I don't want any more slave states. You slave states over here, you're fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. But I don't want any more new slave states. And it was people's paranoia and fear that ultimately, helped spark the Civil War. And definitely slavery was a huge role in that. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the only role. And to some degree, what the people were really upset about, while it was kind of like the main issue at play, it wasn't, how to explain this, it was the main issue on the drawing board in terms of the issue that they were talking about, but it wasn't really the big issue that they were worried about. Mm-hmm. That is to say, the South was really, really concerned about the federal government trying to take over and take control over states' rights. That was the massive issue. That was the massive, massive issue. Was slavery the thing that was going back and forth? Yeah. Yeah. Because what the states were basically saying is the state has a right to say that this is a slave state or a not slave state. And the federal government, basically what they were afraid of is that the federal government was going to come in and say, no, we trump even states' rights. And so basically that was kind of the big thing that was at issue. Now, of course, again, even as I say this, it was a lot more complex than this. But at the same time, it's like when you understand that, you can begin to understand why these people were out of their minds crazy, ready to go to war over this. Yeah, yeah. It was not just as simple as...
Well, and so many of them weren't even slave owners, so I don't know, it's a big... But it's interesting because, I definitely know plenty of people who would immediately jump into this and just go, that's all bullcrap. Yeah. It's all about slavery. And that's all they, so it's just interesting because like you said, we have a hard time right now with sort of seeing the other people's side and understand that. And it's just, this is one of those topics that people, they just shut down instantly and say, no, absolutely not. It's just about slavery.
Well, and you could, and again, you can kind of sense both sides. Cause like, even as I'm trying to lay this out, like, you can already tell that you're going to have one person who says, yeah, you're right. No, it's about slavery. All they talked about was slavery, in which case you go, well, yeah, that's definitely what they were talking about. That was definitely the issue at hand that they were talking about, but realize like it wasn't just slavery. It was actually this big thing about states' rights versus, federal rights and the governmental rights. But even more than that, like you can't just go completely the other direction either. Because like this was definitely the issue that was leading the way. So on the one hand, you can't just divorce slavery out of it and say, oh no, slavery really didn't play a role. Yeah, it did. It played a huge role. Right. But on the other hand, you can't say, yeah, but slavery was really the only thing that they cared about. No, that's incorrect. That is completely incorrect. And so you have to kind of, and again, look, this is what I always say. Like these people were not unreasonable. At least most of them weren't. I mean, I'm sure there's some crazies out there, but like most of these were intelligent, free-thinking, thoughtful people. and they said, yeah, this is severe enough to where I need to take up arms.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you gotta kind of pause a little bit when people are like, yeah, I'm going to go kill people and they're going to try to kill me and we're going to go to war over this. Like, there's a big issue at hand. Like, you need to get to the root of it. Mm-hmm. And until you get to the root of it, you really don't have any business saying, oh, yeah, this is definitely it. Like, no. And that's what we've done. Like, we've done as a society is we've made everything into like 140 characters or less. Like, if I can just get this 140 characters, like, they tore down Robert E. Lee statues, mm-hmm. All over the place. And it's a real shame. Because, I mean, here was a very intelligent man who basically said he didn't like slavery. He actually would rather have fought for the North. However, he refused to fight against his own family.
Interesting.
Who is in the South. And so he ended up being a general for the South. And so, I mean, again, before we just say, oh, yeah, he was an evil bigot, like, we need to stop and think. Like, this man was, there's a reason that this man was considered a national treasure. Like, there's a reason they put statues of this man up. And it was not because he was just some bigot who hated people.
Right.
Like,
Well, and it's interesting because you probably learned a lot more about him than I probably did growing up. Because for me, it was just like, yeah, there's the South for you. There it is. And then, here's what the North had to do to like conquer, to end the war and everything. But so it's always just interesting to hear a little bit, more information about people because, especially in history, you can, it's very easy to just delete that paragraph or delete that little section on that person or that information about them and then just completely, look at them from one direction. So.
Well, and again, I think one of the problems that, again, from a cultural standpoint that we're actually facing right now is we try to narrow everybody down to like a singular thing as if people aren't complex. And I think that's a real shame. And I mean, and you see this everywhere, by the way. And I think, and again, kind of trying to bring this maybe back around to more of a church-related kind of element here, mm-hmm. I think that this is really damaging to the Christian church because the Christians that kind of latch on to this idea that they can simply narrow everybody down to a simple stereotype, it causes them to ultimately kind of judge people very quickly in snap judgments. And, I always say kind of the funniest thing that you see this the most probably with NASCAR.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And we laugh because you kind of know exactly where I'm going with this, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like there's a stereotype like, oh, do you go watch NASCAR? And it's like, oh, yeah, they're hillbillies and they're this and they're that. And
they're mountain people.
They're mountain people. They're rednecks or whatever. And to be honest with you, like there's a lot of truth in a lot of those stereotypes. But what they don't tell you is that these are also the same people that are very skilled workers in a lot of cases. Now, is it across the board every case? No. But, there's probably a lot of machinists, mechanics, that especially a lot of mechanics that work on your vehicles that are very good at working on your vehicles. Do you crawl under your hood? Do you want, if you got to replace your transmission, are you the one that, puts the car up and tries to get it? No, of course not.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, again, if you're listening out there, maybe you are. But the point of the matter is,
you probably like NASCAR.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But like these are a lot of times very skilled labor people. They're not going to understand like philosophy per se. I mean, again, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But by and large, a lot of them don't. But that doesn't mean that they're like ignorant or stupid. Mm-hmm. It just means that they don't know that certain thing.
Right.
Now, have a lot of them made bad, poor life choices? Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. But again, you can find that in every field. Some people are just better at hiding it. Mm-hmm. But I always say, like, before you judge people, like take a look at their life actually and actually begin to evaluate, where they are and what they're doing. I'll never forget. And I mean, again, we're kind of bringing this down into the church realm again. We were helping a lady. And this was years and years and years ago. I remember the church I was working with at the time, they were trying to help this gal. And she went, I wouldn't say she was homeless, but she didn't have a job. Her husband I'm trying to remember if they were married or not. But the father of the child worked at a gas station, and she did not work. And I remember we, were trying to help her for a long, long time. And I remember, first of all, I remember it being very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
Because every time you thought you would help her, it was like you do one step forward, two steps back. Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot to be learned from that experience. But the other thing I learned is that this girl would have been, and if she hasn't figured it out yet, I hope she has. I remember talking to her about it for a while. She was an awesome secretary, and that comes from the fact that what she was doing, and it was really skilled. She had access and knew of all the basically the helps that were there in her local community and beyond, in her state community, local community, all that. And she had like a filing cabinet. She had it all organized. She had it color coded, which form she had to fill out, when she had to fill it out, what time it needed to be in. And I mean, on the one hand, you go, oh yeah, she's really taking advantage of the system. And she most definitely was.
Yeah.
That being said, I think she worked a full 40 hours every single week filling out all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, if she could just figure out, like, if you go over here and you're just a secretary, you're actually really, really gifted in this. Like you have this skill, mm-hmm. and you should make someone pay you for this skill because you have it. And then all those things that you're actually filling out forms now will kind of come with it. Again, I hope she figured that out. I don't know if she did or not, but but again, kind of back to NASCAR, a lot of these people are very, very skilled in what they do.
Oh yeah, I mean,
they're gifted, they're brilliant, but yeah, they just kind of get labeled because they watch a race.
Yeah, well,
and I kind of like NASCAR. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, you're a mountain person, but
come from the hills of Missouri.
From the hills of Missouri, but I mean, it is interesting because again, I thought you said something that kind of made me think is that. People try to shorten or like describe something in like a Twitter post or something.
Yeah.
And if you want to sit there and say, it's just a bunch of people in cars driving in a circle, it's like, oh, technically true, but that's like not even close to describing everything that goes into you talk about the mechanics and the people deciding the fuel and how to do, there's so many, they're dealing with literally split seconds. They're trying to cut down time from how fast can they switch on or switch out tires. I mean, it really is very complicated, and they put a lot of work into little tiny details.
Oh, it's amazing. Look, label me all you want, people. But it's so true. It is amazing. Like, these guys have all these regulations on these cars. And I mean, are there little advantages that they get? Oh, of course there are. Of course there are. I mean, and if you're on, team whatever it is, like, yeah, you're going to look for those advantages. But like, still, one of the big points of NASCAR is everybody kind of has the same thing. Yeah. You are really just trying to see who is the better racer. And that's what's amazing, because isn't it amazing that it seems like the same guys tend to win over and over and over again? And yet they're driving a car with, at least hypothetically, that's pretty much the same as all the other cars, mm-hmm. and yet they somehow manage to always win. Like, again, there's something that's skill-based in that. That's really amazing about that. That's really fascinating about that. Now, I should also say I also like drag racing. Like,
drag racing's fun, yeah.
Yeah, drag race. I should say, I shouldn't say every year, but every now and again, usually in I want to say late September. I drive down to the St. Louis, the Gateway drag strip, and we watch some of my family, my dad, my sister, and brother, and everybody. We watch the NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, and we watch the Top Fuel ethanol cars. It's amazing. I love them. I do. And you go around the pits, and you can watch these guys work on these cars, and that's amazing too. Because let me tell you something. It would take me a whole lot longer than an hour to overhaul my car, and these guys do it in like an hour.
Yeah. It's incredible.
It is incredible.
Yeah, but I think that's just in general. There's a guy that he did a music video for my band.
Yeah,
I know this is like probably thinking what. But the thing that I find that was really interesting is that a lot of the guys in my band, they kind of want it to be like a joke. Like they were like, oh, we should do all this stuff, and they want to do all this, like, you know, kind of like just like they wanted to make like a reality show thing and make it really trashy. And I told the guy when I got to talk to him, just us, I said, you know, I work really, really hard on this. And so to me, the whole like, let's make it a reality show and make it all trashy and like, I don't really want to do that because I put so much effort into this. It just kind of feels, you know, I just don't want to. And he said, like, he does a lot of video work with just like a bunch of friends. And he goes, I understand completely because I put so much work into doing videos and everybody else kind of just thinks it's like fun and like a joke and whatever because we make these silly videos, but they don't understand how much time I put into it. So I think for anybody, and we really connected, like me and this guy, and we still keep in touch and stuff. But it's like when you meet someone who kind of goes above and beyond, like they
just take heavy pride in their work.
They take pride in their work. They go beyond just sort of the surface level of what people assume it is. You know, you just kind of start to understand the passion between two people. And like you go, you know, you can go to a NASCAR race, and if you just want to sit there and be like, it's loud, it's like, if you can understand how much work goes into this and how skilled the people are, you know, and it really kind of changes your perspective on a whole subject. And I think maybe to tie it back into church a little bit, I think a lot of people feel they kind of write off Christians or, you know, Christianity in general as just like one sentence on Twitter, like a bunch of hypocrites
absolutely.
Or whatever they want to say it is. And they don't realize even when there's someone who is a Christian who maybe struggles with, you know, maybe being the most polite all the time or having something, they might still be someone who really is trying to be a better person. And they're working really hard on it. And so sometimes they just don't realize that, you know, a lot of people are trying to do the right thing. And this isn't just you can't describe it in one sentence and then move on, you know?
Oh yeah. I think I want to say up until, so I read a book years and years ago. And the book is very interesting. I highly recommend it for those that are bored. It's called Who Killed Homer? And the whole book is about how, as a society, we've slowly gotten rid of philosophy out of the classroom. And what the authors of the book actually, what they talk about is that when they bring this up, they're not talking just about philosophy as a historical topic, but actually philosophy as a way of thought. That is to say, we can all take a history class and learn the names of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and you know, and all these other people that kind of whatever. We can all sit there and study their names, but it's completely different from that versus actually trying to say, okay, if I was to think like Aristotle, how would I do it? If I wanted to think like Plato, how would I do it? And how would I actually process my thought? And so their argument was, as we have pulled philosophy out of the classroom, we've kind of gotten rid of like critical thinking as well. Their book is a bit dated now. A lot of schools have actually tried to add critical thinking back into the classroom for this very reason.
Yeah, it is starting to come back.
So I don't want to make it sound like this is all still the case. I mean, there's still work to do, but at the same time, there is work that's being done. But one of the things that they mention in the book, and I thought this was very interesting, is because they get to a section of the book, and the author is talking about how a lot of people get philosophy degrees, but it's more of a historical venture rather than a process of thought. And again, kind of going back and forth on that topic. And he says, up until like 1990 something or whatever, he said, religion and philosophy took up the most space in any library. They was the most written about topics ever. Theology, actually, biblical theology being actually number one. Yeah. And then slowly kind of taken over by philosophy. And then nowadays, a lot of it is taken over by science. But it's actually kind of a mixture between science and philosophy. Those two kind of intersect a little bit, with that. And so it was very interesting to kind of think about, like, up until, like, I don't know, 91, 92. I could be wrong on the dates. Don't hold me to those. But basically, up until very not so long ago, basically, if you went to any library, the bulk majority of the books written over the years that we have, more pages were written about faith and religion and Christianity and philosophy than any other topic. And so, no, it's not real simple. It's in fact, depending on how deep you want to go, it can be incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Long way around. I went the long way to get to there.
No, but I think it makes sense, And I know we're probably preaching to the choir here, but it's I think I wish more people would kind of because I know some people in my life that I wish they would maybe understand that a little more, because they kind of just have they labeled Christians as one thing, very simple to explain to how they explain it. It's like I wish they could just understand that it's just not that simple. But
well, and I mean, again, this kind of goes all the way back to the whole you got to understand people where they're at. I mean, look, I'll tell you a darker period of Lutheran history.
Okay.
There was a time when the Anabaptists were growing throughout mainly southern Germany, but as they grew larger, they grew slightly more powerful. And there is this unique period of time where the Catholics and the Lutherans actually got together. Now, the Catholics and the Lutherans, because this is like the mid-1500s, I think Luther was still alive for this, to be honest with you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they basically hunted down a group of Anabaptists, and they drowned them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Again, it's brutal. It's war, And there was kind of this infighting, and there was this kind of war going on. And so you get this dark part of history, and your first reaction is, "Oh, that's really awful. I can't believe, Lutherans and Catholics were, but again, I always come back to this, like, you got to understand the thought. You got to understand what was going on. Because at the time, see, the Anabaptists back then were a lot different than what we would conceive of the Baptist or Reformed churches today.
Yeah.
They were very, very different. But one of the things that they did that was really, really bad is as they began to gain power in certain areas, they started to kick out the Catholics and the Lutherans because they considered them heretics, unchristians, Satanist almost.
Yeah.
They condemned them because they refused to be baptized again. And so in their eyes, and you can read some of their writing about this, they firmly believe that, even people, the kings, Romans, not the Romans, the kings, the emperor, all that they should be like either beheaded or killed or whatever. Wow. Like they really thought that they were like the heathen that were trying to snuff Christianity.
Yeah.
And so they, no holds barred, they must die because they're not Christian. And that was, and you got to remember that was the whole thing, right? Since those people were not being baptized again, hence the Anabaptist, the Ana actually means again. So Anabaptist and that movement, they firmly felt that everybody else was simply not Christian. They were the only Christians around. That was it.
Yeah.
And everybody else, either get in line or get dead. And it was a very brutal time. And so the Lutherans and the Catholics joined forces, and they said, we got to put an end to this.
Yeah.
And they did in a brutal fashion. And but you'll notice I still called it a dark part of Lutheran history. I didn't say, see, this explains it all, and now we're all good with it. No,
yeah.
I think the Lutherans and the Catholics still did wrong.
Yeah,
but at the same time, it probably makes it a little bit more understandable once you understand a little bit more of the history that kind of went on with that.
Yeah. Funny because I don't know if I brought this up the other day. I've talked to a few people recently and brought this up because there's a comedian who did a little short video where he talked about how certain denominations don't believe that other denominations are truly like Christian or, are saved or whatever. And he said, I don't know if this is a phrase that someone else made up or he made up, but he said it's called gracism. And I thought that was really funny. but it's definitely true. There are people in history too. There's been lots of times where, people, went kind of decided that, okay, well, this group of people or this denomination, they're just not real Christians. So, yeah. But,
yeah. And I mean, I'll be honest, that does bring up an interesting question. Like, and that's a question I actually get quite a bit is how do you determine a real Christian from a non-Christian? Obviously you can't look for necessarily, you can look at outward signs, but I mean, look, the Mormon next door is going to be a great neighbor. They're going to be an awesome neighbor.
Yeah, I've known a few Mormons. They're very nice people.
Very nice people. Very awesome people. But then you look at what they believe, and you're like, oh, wait, no, these guys are not Christians. They're just not. And so you go, okay, well, what makes up a Christian versus a non-Christian? Mm-hmm. And if you take it down to the very lowest denominator.
Yeah, make a Twitter post about it.
If you're going to make a Twitter post about it, it's going to boil down to, and I always like to say it kind of like this whenever I explain it to people. I always say, like, look, one of the biggest things is that you have to have faith in Christ, as your Lord and Savior. But I say one of the problems that you have is that, like, without a definition of who Christ is, like, you can just name something Christ and say you have faith in it, and does that save you? And the answer is no. It's not just a title. It's actually who he is. And so you have to start defining, and that's basically what it comes down to. If you're going to place your faith in God, and believe in the work of Christ Jesus, you better know who Jesus is, and you better know who God is. Mm-hmm. And so in a lot of books, both Catholic, Lutheran, I think Presbyterian, and there's several others, they'll narrow it down, in essence, to basically the Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of what the early church did too, by the way. If you look at the Council of Nicaea, the Council of like Chalcedon or Chalcedon, however you want to pronounce that one, and several of the others, you'll notice that the Trinity keeps coming up over and over and over again. And that's why. Because whenever you read through the Gospels and you say, okay, this is how God kind of identifies himself and says, this is who I am, mm-hmm. you go, okay, you got three persons, but you only have one God. There is but one God, and you have all these kind of defining attributes. And yes, to a Western philosophy guy, none of these make sense. Mathematically, they don't make any sense. Yeah. But we would expect that with a transcendent God. That is a God who is beyond us, above us, is going to be beyond our understanding. And so you're going to say, okay, so the triune God is our defining mark. And as Lutherans, we tend to hold to that. So like, that's why when we look at the Catholics, we're like, oh yeah, there's a lot of differences between the Lutherans and the Catholics, but they're still Christian. They mm-hmm. still hold to the triune God. They still put their faith in Christ, and so does the Baptist, and so does the Presbyterian, and so does the Anglican, for that matter. But you get to the Mormons, and it's like, no, they don't. You get to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and you're like, no, they really don't. Mm-hmm. And so you get to some of these outliers, and you go, well, what makes them not Christian? Well, they're not putting their faith in the true Christ. They're redefining who he is. Mm-hmm. And then they're saying, put your faith in that. And that really doesn't work.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, are we...
What? I mean, I don't even know how much time.
We're at 47 minutes.
Awesome.
I don't know.
Awesome. Boy, we got off kilter again today.
We did. I mean, we started off with, hey, there's snow outside.
Yeah.
And we got to that, so I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to take up too much time, but
hopefully that made some cohesive sense throughout all that.
So. Yeah.
I'm
really going to have to ask opinions.
Yeah. I do have to say quickly before I forget, this maybe should have been in church chair, but somebody left a $100,000 bar on the pew where I usually stand and play, and it just said from a podcast
that's
listener.
Awesome.
And so thank you to whoever that was. I couldn't find a name on it.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't look hard enough, but they didn't put a name directly on it. So thank you. That was delicious. Had it on my way home.
So just so everybody knows, what that means is this. Some great listener out there gave Casey Doremus $100,000. And
yep. So I will be retiring. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was, very
inflation,
delicious
Casey.
Candy bar. Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, see, and I actually had a topic to talk about.
Okay, what do you? Yeah,
I'll be honest. So here's what I watched a webinar earlier today.
Very nice.
And most of the time, I kind of ignore most of these webinars, just because they take up a lot of time, and a lot of times they don't give you a lot of information.
Yes, I know what you mean.
And so this one was done by our software that we use at church, and I decided to watch it. And don't get me wrong, I was doing a bunch of other stuff on the side because it's a webinar, so I'm at my computer. Mm-hmm. But this one actually turned out to be pretty decent. A lot of these guys usually go on with like, here's the problem coming up, and here's how our software can fix it.
Yeah.
And but at one point in time, they actually paused and they kind of said, like, look, And they rattle off some of these statistics, but the one that really caught my eye was it said something like, people from the ages of like, I don't know if it was like 13, but 13 to 40, basically, when asked in a blind survey, basically felt very, very alone and very ostracized. And so one of the things that the webinar did is they kind of paused for a second. And they said, like, guys, like, we make software, we make the app, we try to get your, church digital and all that kind of stuff. But if your church isn't helping to bring people together, and not through a Zoom call, but actually just being together, you're missing the point. And I'll be honest, I had to do a pause. I was like, really? A company that sells our app and everything else is telling us we need to get people together? I'm like,
yeah, right.
But again, it was just one of those things that, like, I really actually, first of all, I appreciated the point that they actually stopped and actually did that. I thought that was actually a very good thing. But I also thought it was really something that emphasized the point that, you have a lot of people right now that believe they are very, very connected, whether it's through this social media or that one, whatever one it happens to be. But the reality is that, like, if you do a blind survey, people don't feel like that.
Yeah.
And look, guys, sometimes it's a good idea just to put the screens down and just focus on just being present in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that especially as we kind of start to gather around this time of year, as we start getting, closer and closer to Christmas and that holiday, look, guys, and I'll be the first to admit as I say this, with my phone literally sitting right to the side of me. I always say, I guess I should say it like this. I don't want this to sound like I'm being judgmental, because I'm not. I'm saying this as somebody who has the same struggle as most of you, and who has the same struggle as a parent as probably a lot of you, and that is to say that it's okay to have moments or times when you can have people put down your phone, play a board game, take them to church, and make them turn the screens off for a little bit. Church is actually a really, really good thing. And I mean, yes, okay.
Whoa, okay. Let's not get controversial here.
Right? Okay. So here's the other part of this too, though. I mean, like, even when I talk about that, like, from a theological side, church is obviously very important. We have the presence of God. We have God's word coming at us. We have all these things. But even from a sociological side, church is very, very good. No, I mean, think about this. Where else do you have the youngest of the young and the oldest of the old all together in one place, presumably trying to do the same thing?
That's a very good point. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Right? It's where your little kids learn how to grow up. It's where they learn what it means to be an adult. But it's also where they get a chance to interact, and they get to see everybody from the 1-month-old baby in a carriage all the way up to, goodness knows. I mean, I know we don't see our oldest members every week, but I know we have at least one that's 102 years old.
Yeah.
So, I mean, possibly 100-year-old. So we have 0 to 100, all there. And, and that moment of coming together in a place like that is actually very, very healthy psychologically, so societally. And I know I've briefly mentioned it at one of our previous podcasts, but also from a chemical side of things. Believe it or not, scientists have actually done studies and discovered that, like, the human body is amazing. Whenever we get that feeling that we're not alone, that's not just like in our heads. That's actually our bodies actually chemically reacting with other people and such. Mm-hmm. And even a hug can actually help somebody incredibly. And so it's one of those things where, like, even coming, standing elbow to elbow next to somebody can be very beneficial, can be very uplifting, and it can really uplift your spirits quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting into the season where we're going to see the sun a lot less. Yes. We're going to have vitamin D deficiencies. We have seasonal depression effectiveness kind of coming our way. look, coming to church is actually a huge thing. And yes, I know I'm preaching to the choir because, yes, I understand. Yeah, we have all these theological things that I normally harp on.
Right.
And those are all still true and those are all still valid.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you just need an excuse from a societal standpoint, there's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of good stuff.
Yeah, there is. And it's not really a secret anymore that the statistics for suicide and all sorts of stuff really go high up this time of year. And it's I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who feel alone, and the worst thing you can do is just stay at home.
Yeah,
it's really the worst thing you can do because I mean,
if 2020 taught us anything, it was that.
Yes, yeah. So getting out and seeing people, and I mean, usually, I feel like I have a problem with just like being too busy this time of year because doing so much, but that's also. I think a really good thing at the same time is seeing so many people, seeing family, getting out there, and yeah.
Yeah. Come on, everybody, pick up a deck of cards. It's okay.
That's right. Try something, go play some board games, all sorts of stuff. It's fun.
Yeah. Board game. It's board game season. I like board games. All right. Well, I guess it is time now.
It's probably time, yeah.
It's probably time to get to Church Chatter. Church Chatter. Boy, I tell you, it is getting to be that busy time of year. We have this Wednesday, which is just a traditional, regular Wednesday service.
Well, contemporary, right?
Yeah, it's contemporary. Sorry. Yeah, it's a contemporary service. Obviously everybody's welcome to come. It's a great time.
We have a good time on Wednesdays.
Yeah, we like our group on Wednesdays. They're a good bunch. So, and they're always looking for more. So, anybody else want to come on Wednesdays, perfectly welcome to.
Yeah.
That church service is at 5:30. Then, of course, next Wednesday on December 6th. December 6th is our very first Advent midweek series. The theme this year is Peace Came to Earth. So can't wait to dig into that. And the meal after that is going to be our pancakes and our Raber's sausage.
Yeah, Raber's sausage.
And so we look forward to that. And there's more meals to come, of course, for sure. So obviously we want to talk about that. One of the things, actually, I was driving my kids to school today, and I actually kind of mentioned this. For those of you that don't know, December 6th actually does hold some significance. December 6th is St. Nick's Day. Now, traditionally, on St. Nick's Day, everybody that's paying attention, that cares. First of all, this man really, for those of you that are going like, well, that's just a legend. Well, he really did exist. He was at the Council of Nicaea in 325. The joke is always that he was the one who was talking to a man, a heretic by the name of Arius, leapt over the table and punched Arius in the face.
Yeah, that's what we like to hear. Yeah.
That's right. Saint Nick, who couldn't stand heresy. So anyway, we always make a big deal out of that because it's an interesting tidbit of history. But from a traditional standpoint, he is celebrated on December 6th, which means that is probably around the time that he died. Saints are typically celebrated on the day that they died. And again, we don't look at him like we're going to pray to him or anything like that, just like he is a hero of the faith. He was a champion of the faith, St. Nicholas of Myra. But the legend of St. Nick has to do with your stockings. And so in a traditional household, you would open up your stockings on December 6th. And that is where you'd get your St. Nick's gifts.
Interesting.
They wouldn't be your big, massive gifts under the tree. They would be the gifts in your stockings.
So traditionally, it wouldn't be on Christmas that you would get?
It'd be December 6th.
Interesting.
Because that's St. Nick's Day.
I tell you what, I think that's something maybe we should bring back.
Well, maybe next week.
Maybe next week we'll bring it back.
Maybe next week. But yes, so yeah, in a kind of traditionally, that would be when you would do your stockings.
Interesting. Wow. That is, I tell you what, that would be probably bad in my house right now because my son's birthday is November 13th, and it's been dragged out for like 3 weeks of celebrating. So if he would get a gift next week, it would just, I don't know. I think his psyche, he's starting to really get this, like, I get presents all the time.
Just nonstop.
Christmas is coming. And, like, he's just very excited. Anyway, but besides that, is there anything else as far as December 6th that you wanted to add to that?
Yo, you're hoping for something now. No,
Well,
no more gifts.
I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast or not, but it's been 11 years now. I wrote I had a Christmas album I did with my band.
Yeah,
we recorded it in a garage, not great quality. I mean, it's when I listen to it, it's one of those things where you're like, for a bunch of college kids, not half bad.
So wait, you're telling me you're a garage band?
Exactly.
Are you from Seattle?
No, unfortunately not. Well, I don't really want to be from Seattle. Anyway, but what I wrote a song called Santa Played the Barry because it was I had 2 Barry saxophones. I thought it'd be a funny so I made this funny, cheesy song called Santa Played the Barry. As I was researching Saint Nick, you said Saint Nick of Myra,
yeah,
right? But also, apparently, he was also known as Saint Nick of Barry.
That's a new one on me.
You'll have to look it up and see it.
Now I got to look this up.
But I had no idea. So my song that I wrote called Santa Played the Barry sounds way more intelligent now that I found out this tidbit of information that apparently he also was, mostly I think Myra was the most well-known part, but apparently there's something else. Saint Nick of Barry.
Oh, I'm looking it up. I'm looking it up right now.
So my song has I guess some sort of authenticity to it now.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah, it's I don't know, that's crazy. I'd never planned that. And found out about that about 10 years later. So very interesting. But is there any other?
I'm sorry.
I know
now
you're looking it up.
See,
I know.
See, the phone is
the
right there.
The phone's right there,
and I had to look it up. I'm like looking this up. Yeah. I'm like, Bari, Barry, but
yeah.
I'm gonna have to do some research on that one. Yeah.
And I mean, Bari, which is the shortened way of saying baritone saxophone. You say Barry sax.
Yeah.
So interesting.
It's the same. He was the patron saint of baritone saxophone.
There you
go. Oh man. But yeah, so anyway, so we are definitely walking into the busy season. We got the church decorated. It looks gorgeous. Did that on Sunday. It was always a good time. I love putting on the Christmas music and hanging stuff. And so we had a lot of fun with it. And now we get to march on in to the first week of Advent, the first Sunday in Advent. I actually won't be there on Sunday.
Yeah.
But the very first Sunday in Advent is this Sunday, December 3rd. So,
Pastor Miller, right?
Yep, it'll be Pastor Miller will be there. So we certainly look forward to that. But yeah. So I'm trying to think what else we got.
Well, you'll get in trouble for something.
I'm definitely going to get in trouble.
We're going to forget about
I always get in trouble for
this
something.
season. I mean, it's a jam-packed season. It's a fun time.
It is. It's a jam-packed season. Yeah. Look at the back end of your bulletin, please, everybody.
I do know this isn't really church news, but I know Friends in Harmony are
doing
Friends in Harmony doing their
That's a good
show.
catch. That's a good catch. Yes, the Friends in Harmony is this weekend. I know it's Friday and Saturday. I can't remember if they do a Sunday afternoon show.
I don't remember.
But the Friends in Harmony, actually, it's a really fun show to go to, and if you've never been to it, it's a lot of fun. You get to hear a lot of your Christmas classics and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of a fun show to go to.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't know if there's any others.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
That might be it.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else to go. Nope. I know they're wrapping angel tree gifts this coming Sunday. See, now we're just to this. Oh, wait, don't forget about this.
Oh, what about?
Yeah. So anyway, there's too much. I'm sure we're forgetting something, but there's just so much going on right now. But yeah, be sure to let me know all the things that I've forgotten about. But anyway, that's all the time that we have for this evening. So thank everybody for joining us tonight or for today. And we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.